There is a particular kind of silence that only those who have awakened understand. It is not the absence of sound. It is the presence of something so vast, so infinite, that words become inadequate vessels. And if you have ever stood at the edge of this silence, if you have ever felt the ground of your old self crumble beneath you, while something ancient and luminous emerged from within, then you already know what I am about to say. Some things are not meant to be spoken, not because they are shameful, not because they are wrong, but because they are sacred. And sacred things, when exposed to the wrong light, do not flourish. They wither, they become distorted, they lose their power to transform. Thomas Merton, the contemplative monk who spent decades navigating the inner landscape of the soul, understood this with profound clarity. He knew that the spiritual path is not a performance, it is not a trophy to be displayed. It is a quiet revolution that happens in the depths of your being, far from the applause of the world. And yet, we live in an age of constant exposure. An age where every thought must be shared, every experience broadcasted, every transformation turned into content. We have forgotten the ancient wisdom that some truths protect themselves through secrecy, that some doors once opened must be guarded with the fierce tenderness of someone who knows what it cost to find them. If you have had a spiritual awakening, if you have touched something beyond the ordinary fabric of existence, then this is for you, not as a warning born of fear, but as a gentle reminder born of love. There are certain things that, once revealed carelessly, can unravel the very fabric of your transformation. Let us walk together through these hidden territories. The first thing you must learn to protect is the depth of your inner experience. When awakening happens, it does not arrive with trumpets and fanfare. It comes like the first light of dawn, soft and gradual, illuminating corners of your consciousness you never knew existed. You begin to see patterns where others see chaos. You begin to feel currents of energy that move beneath the surface of daily life. You begin to understand that what you thought was reality was merely the thinnest layer of something infinitely deeper. And in those first moments of expanded awareness, there is an overwhelming desire to share. You want to tell everyone. You want to grab strangers by the shoulders and say, look at what I have discovered. The universe is alive. Consciousness is everywhere. We are not separate beings moving through an indifferent cosmos. We are waves in an ocean of infinite intelligence. But here is what Merton understood, what the mystics of every tradition have always known. The moment you try to translate the infinite into words, something essential is lost. Language was designed for the marketplace, for the exchange of practical information, for the navigation of the material world. It was not designed to carry the weight of eternity. When you speak too freely about your inner experience, several things begin to happen. First, you dilute the experience itself. Every time you describe it, you create a mental copy, a simplified version that becomes easier to access than the original. Over time, you begin to relate more to your description than to the actual experience. The living truth becomes a dead concept. Second, you invite judgment and misunderstanding. Most people have not touched the places you have touched. They have not seen what you have seen. And when you share from the depths of your being, they will interpret your words through the filter of their own limited experience. They will reduce your revelation to something manageable, something that fits within their existing framework. And their reduction will begin to affect you. You will start to doubt. You will start to wonder if perhaps you imagined it all. Third, and perhaps most importantly, you waste precious energy. The spiritual path requires enormous reserves of inner power. Every word you speak carries a portion of your vital force. When you scatter your words carelessly, you scatter your energy. You disperse the very fuel you need for the next stage of your transformation. This does not mean you must become secretive or dishonest. It means you must become discerning. Learn to recognize the difference between genuine spiritual companionship and casual curiosity. There are people with whom you can share everything, people who have walked similar paths and can receive your words with the reverence they deserve. And there are people who are simply not ready, not because they are inferior, but because they are on a different journey. Protect your inner experience like you would protect a newborn child, not with walls and defenses, but with gentle, loving vigilance. The second sacred territory that requires protection is the nature of your transformation process. Awakening is not a single event. It is a continuous unfolding. And this unfolding does not follow a straight line. It spirals. It loops back on itself. It plunges you into darkness just when you thought you had found the light. It lifts you to heights of ecstasy and then drops you into valleys of confusion. When you are in the midst of this process, it can be tempting to narrate every step, to post updates as if your spiritual journey were a travel blog. Today I released old trauma. Yesterday I had a vision. Last week I felt complete unity with all existence. But Merton warned against this tendency with quiet insistence. He understood that the transformative process is delicate, almost organic. It responds to attention the way a plant responds to sunlight. When you expose it too soon, before it has developed roots, it becomes vulnerable to forces it cannot yet withstand. There is a reason why caterpillars build cocoons. The dissolution of the old form and the emergence of the new is a process that cannot withstand external interference. If you open the cocoon too early, the butterfly dies. Its wings never develop the strength to fly. Your transformation is no different. There are stages that must happen in darkness. There are deaths that must occur in solitude. There are rebirths that require the warm protection of silence before they can face the world. When you speak about your process prematurely, you interrupt it. You crystallize stages that were meant to remain fluid. You create expectations, both in yourself and others, that interfere with the organic intelligence of your evolution. Moreover, when you broadcast your transformation, you invite the opinions and projections of others into your sacred space. People will offer advice based on their own experience, which may be completely irrelevant to your path. They will express concerns that plant seeds of doubt. They will celebrate milestones that were never meant to be endpoints, causing you to stagnate when you should keep moving. The wise approach is to let the process complete itself, or at least reach a stable phase before you begin to share. Speak from integration, not from the chaos of becoming. Share the wisdom you have gained, not the rawness of your wounds. Offer the fruit, not the struggle of the harvest. This requires patience. It requires trust in the process. It requires the humility to admit that you do not fully understand what is happening to you, and that this not knowing is not a problem to be solved, but a mystery to be lived. The third thing you must guard with particular care is your growing ability to perceive the hidden dimensions of reality. As awakening deepens, the veils between worlds grow thin. You begin to see what has always been there, but was hidden from ordinary sight. The energy that moves between people, the patterns that connect seemingly random events, the subtle influences that shape collective behavior, the presence of something vast and intelligent operating beneath the surface of existence. This is where many seekers lose their way. Not because the perception is false, but because they do not know how to hold it. They rush to share their visions, their insights, their glimpses behind the curtain. And in doing so, they encounter one of two responses, both of which are dangerous. The first response is disbelief. The majority of people, still anchored firmly in the consensus reality, will dismiss your perceptions as fantasy, delusion, or wishful thinking. They will look at you with that particular mixture of pity and concern that signals their conviction that you have lost touch with reality. And their disbelief, especially when it comes from people you love and respect, can be deeply destabilizing. It can make you question your own sanity. It can drive you to suppress the very faculties that are trying to awaken. The second response is even more dangerous. Some people will believe you too readily. They will become fascinated with your abilities. They will put you on a pedestal. They will come to you seeking visions and insights, treating you as a guru rather than a fellow traveler. And this attention, this adulation, is one of the greatest traps on the spiritual path. Merton saw this trap clearly. He observed how spiritual gifts, when displayed publicly, almost inevitably lead to spiritual pride. The ego, which awakening was meant to dissolve, finds a new and more subtle way to reassert itself. It becomes the spiritual ego, the one who sees more, knows more, perceives more than ordinary mortals. And this spiritual ego is far more difficult to detect and dismantle than the ordinary ego, precisely because it wears the mask of wisdom. The solution is not to deny your perceptions or to suppress your growing faculties. The solution is to hold them lightly, to use them in service of love and truth without making them the center of your identity, to recognize that the ability to perceive is not a personal achievement, but a gift that comes with profound responsibility. Share your insights only when they serve the genuine good of others, and even then, share them humbly, without claiming special status, without positioning yourself as one who has access to truths denied to the common person. Remember always that whatever you can see, others can learn to see as well. You are not special. You are simply awake. And awakeness is the birthright of every soul. The fourth territory of sacred silence concerns your understanding of others. As your perception deepens, you will begin to see people more clearly. Not just their surface presentation, not just the mask they wear for the world, but the deeper currents of their being. Their wounds, their fears, their hidden motivations, their unacknowledged potential. Their shadow selves lurking beneath the polished exterior. This is perhaps the most delicate gift of awakening and the one most easily misused. When you can see into the depths of another person, you hold a kind of power. You know things they have not revealed. You perceive patterns they are not aware of. You understand causes that they have long buried. And the temptation to use this knowledge, to speak it aloud, to illuminate their darkness, whether they have asked for illumination or not, is almost irresistible. But Merton, who spent years in the silence of monastic community, understood that unsolicited revelation is a form of violence. When you expose someone's hidden truth without their consent, you do not help them. You violate them. You strip away the protective covering they need to survive. You accelerate a process of self-confrontation they may not be ready for. Moreover, what you see is never the complete truth. Your perception, however expanded, is still filtered through your own conditioning, your own blind spots, your own unresolved material. When you speak as if you see the whole truth of another person, you project as much as you perceive. You may be accurate about some things and completely wrong about others. And even your accurate perceptions may be only partial, taken out of the larger context that gives them meaning. The awakened approach is to hold what you see with tenderness, to let it inform how you treat people without necessarily being spoken aloud, to offer compassion based on your understanding without requiring recognition for your insight, to be a quiet witness rather than a vocal interpreter. There is a profound practice here. It is the practice of seeing and not saying, of knowing and not needing others to know that you know, of using your perception to deepen your love rather than to demonstrate your awareness. When others are ready to see themselves more clearly, they will ask. They will create the opening through their own seeking, and even then, the wise response is often to ask questions rather than provide answers, to reflect rather than reveal, to accompany rather than expose. This restraint is not a denial of truth. It is a recognition that truth, to be truly transformative, must be discovered by each soul in its own time, in its own way. The forced revelation of truth, however accurate, rarely produces liberation. More often it produces defensiveness, shame, and deeper hiding. The fifth and final sacred silence concerns the ultimate nature of what you have discovered. At the deepest levels of awakening, seekers touch something that defies all description. Call it God, call it the Absolute, call it the ground of being, call it the Tao that cannot be named. Whatever words you use, they will be inadequate. And yet the mind, desperate to understand and communicate, will keep trying to find words. Merton spent his life in this struggle. He wrote volumes trying to point toward what cannot be pointed toward. He knew the futility of the endeavor even as he persisted in it, and in his deepest writings, you can feel him straining against the limits of language, gesturing toward a silence that swallows all words. When you have touched this ultimate reality even briefly, you will feel the same impossible urge. You will want to share what you have found. You will want to give others the gift of what you have received, and you will discover, perhaps with frustration, perhaps with humility, that the gift cannot be given through words. The mystics of all traditions have arrived at the same conclusion. They developed elaborate systems of negative theology, saying what the ultimate is not, because nothing positive can be said. They created koans and paradoxes designed to short-circuit the rational mind. They fell into poetry and metaphor, knowing that indirect pointing is the closest language can come. And yet many seekers, in their enthusiasm to share, rush past these warnings. They declare their understanding. They explain the nature of reality. They teach systems and methods as if the infinite could be captured in a technique, and in doing so, they create more obstacles than openings. The problem is not that they are wrong. Often they have touched something genuine. The problem is that their words, however inspired, become objects for the mind to grasp, and whatever the mind grasps becomes an obstacle to direct experience. People begin to seek the description rather than the reality described. They memorize the teaching and forget to look at what the teaching points toward. Merton understood that the deepest teaching is transmitted through presence, not through words. When you have truly touched the ultimate, your being is transformed, and this transformed being communicates directly to other beings, bypassing the mind entirely. A glance, a gesture, a quality of attention. These transmit more than volumes of explanation. The wisest teachers have always taught less than they knew, not out of selfishness, not out of a desire to maintain power, but out of recognition that the mystery protects itself through the limitations of language. That real transmission happens in silence, that the ultimate gift is not information but invitation. If you have touched the ultimate, your task is not to describe it but to embody it, not to explain it but to live from it, not to teach it but to be it. And when you are being it fully, those who are ready will recognize something in you that calls to something in themselves. They will be drawn into their own inquiry, their own seeking, their own discovery. And this is the only transmission that truly liberates. Now let us pause here and consider something essential. Everything I have said might sound like a call to isolation, to withdrawal, to building walls around your inner life. But that is not the message at all. The sacred silence I am pointing toward is not a rejection of connection. It is the foundation for genuine connection. When you protect your inner depths from casual exposure, you create the conditions for true intimacy. When you guard your transformation process, you ensure that what you eventually share comes from completion rather than confusion. When you hold your perceptions with humility, you become capable of truly seeing others rather than projecting onto them. When you refrain from unsolicited revelation, you honor the autonomy and timing of every soul. When you resist the urge to explain the ultimate, you point more effectively toward direct experience. This is the paradox that Merton lived and taught. The deepest communication happens through restraint. The most powerful sharing happens through selective silence. The greatest gift you can give is not your words, but your presence, fully anchored in what you have discovered, radiating without needing to declare. There is a beauty in this way of being that the modern world has largely forgotten. We have become addicted to expression, to output, to the constant demonstration of our inner lives. We have lost the art of containment, the power of the unsaid, the eloquence of silence. But if you have truly awakened, you will begin to remember this ancient wisdom. You will feel in your bones that some things are meant to be treasured rather than traded, that some truths gain power through concealment, that some experiences deepen precisely because they are not dissipated through speech. This does not mean you become dishonest or inauthentic. It means you become selective. You learn to discern when sharing serves the good and when it depletes you. You learn to recognize the difference between genuine communication and spiritual exhibitionism. You learn to speak from fullness rather than from need, from completion rather than from seeking validation. And perhaps most importantly, you learn to trust the process. You learn that what is meant to be shared will find its way to those who need it. You learn that your transformed presence is already communicating everything essential. You learn that the universe has its own timing, its own wisdom, its own way of ensuring that every soul receives exactly what it needs. There is a story that I carry with me, though I do not know its origin. It speaks of a teacher who was asked by a student why he said so little about his profound experiences. The teacher replied that he once had a garden of the most beautiful flowers. Every day, visitors came and asked to pick just one flower, just one small bloom to take home. And because the teacher loved the visitors and wanted to share his joy, he said yes each time. Soon the garden was bare. The flowers, which had created such beauty together, were scattered across 1,000 homes, where each one wilted alone. The teacher then planted a new garden, but this time he invited visitors only to sit among the flowers, to enjoy their beauty without taking anything away. And something remarkable happened. The garden flourished more than ever before. The flowers seemed to bloom more brilliantly, more abundantly, knowing they were being appreciated but not consumed. And the visitors, instead of going home with a dying bloom, went home with seeds. Seeds that had fallen naturally in their own time, that they could plant in their own gardens. This is the way of sacred silence. You do not hoard your gifts. You do not hide them out of fear or selfishness. But you do not scatter them carelessly either. You allow them to flourish in your inner garden. You invite others to sit with you among them. And you trust that what is meant to be transmitted will find its way, in its own time, in its own form. Let me speak now to those who have made the other choice. To those who have shared too freely, too soon, and have felt the consequences. Perhaps you spoke of your awakening and watched it fade. Perhaps you announced your transformation and felt the energy drain from the process. Perhaps you revealed what you could see and were met with disbelief that shook your confidence. Perhaps you exposed the truth of others and watched relationships crumble. Perhaps you explained the ultimate and found your words becoming a prison rather than a doorway. If this is your experience, there is no need for shame or regret. These are common passages on the path. Almost everyone who awakens goes through a phase of enthusiastic sharing before learning the value of restraint. The important thing is not to berate yourself for past mistakes, but to learn from them and to begin now to cultivate the art of sacred silence. The good news is that the inner source is not depleted by past overflows. It continues to spring up, fresh and new in every moment. Whatever has been scattered can be regathered. Whatever has been diminished can be renewed. The transformation process does not end because you spoke of it prematurely. It simply goes underground for a while, waiting for the conditions to resume. Begin again. This time with more awareness, this time with more discernment, this time with the understanding that protection and sharing are not opposites, but partners in a dance that you are still learning. And let me speak finally to those who are just beginning, to those who feel the first stirrings of awakening and wonder what to do with them. My counsel is simple. Move slowly. Watch carefully. Notice the urge to share and examine it before acting on it. Ask yourself whether speaking will serve the good or whether it will merely relieve the tension of holding something precious. Find one person, perhaps two, with whom you can speak freely. People who have walked similar paths, people who will neither dismiss your experience nor inflate it, people who can witness without judging, accompany without advising, receive without needing to respond. And for everyone else, let your life be your teaching. Let your presence be your communication. Let the changes in how you treat others be the evidence of your transformation. This is more persuasive than any words. This is more transmissive than any explanation. This is the silent sermon that Merton preached through decades of monastic life. The world does not need more spiritual teachers. It needs more spiritually transformed beings who do not need to teach. It needs more people who have integrated their awakening so deeply that it no longer requires expression. It needs more embodied silence, moving through the noise of daily life like a quiet river, moving through a restless city. This is the invitation. Not to hide your light, but to let it shine through your being rather than your words. Not to deny your gifts, but to use them without announcing them. Not to isolate yourself, but to connect from a place of fullness rather than need. The 5 sacred silences I have described are not rules to be followed, but territories to be explored. They are not restrictions, but protections. They are not limitations, but the conditions for true flowering. If you have had a spiritual awakening, you carry something precious, something the world needs desperately, whether it knows it or not. But the world will only receive what you carry if you know how to hold it, if you know when to speak and when to remain silent, if you know the difference between sharing and scattering. May you find this knowing in yourself. May you trust it when you find it. May you let it guide you through the beautiful, difficult, endless journey of becoming what you already are. And in the meantime, may you rest in the silence that holds all things, the silence from which you came, the silence to which you return, the silence that has never, for a single moment, stopped speaking to those who have learned how to listen. This is the secret that Merton knew. This is the truth that awakening reveals. In the end, all words dissolve into silence. All teaching returns to presence. All paths lead to the still point where there is nothing left to say, nothing left to prove, nothing left to protect. Because in that place there is nothing separate from the sacred, no inside and outside, no self and other, no hidden and revealed. There is only this moment, this breath, this vast, luminous, wordless knowing that has no beginning and no end. And it is enough, more than enough, it is everything. But before we part, let me offer one more reflection, one more thread to weave into this tapestry of sacred silence. There is a quality of loneliness that comes with awakening, not the ordinary loneliness of lacking company, but a deeper, more existential loneliness. The loneliness of seeing what others do not see. The loneliness of standing at a window that opens onto infinity while others remain in rooms without windows. This loneliness is real. It should not be denied or spiritualized away. When you have touched something beyond the ordinary, you can no longer pretend the ordinary is all there is. And this knowing creates a distance, a subtle gap between you and those who have not touched what you have touched. The temptation when faced with this loneliness is to share compulsively, to try to bring others to where you stand, to flood the gap with words hoping understanding will bridge it. But as we have seen, this rarely works. More often, it widens the gap. What then is the answer to this loneliness? Merton found his answer in solitude. Not the solitude of abandonment, but the solitude of communion. He discovered that when you stop seeking to be understood by others and turn your attention fully toward the source of your awakening, something miraculous happens. The loneliness transforms into a communion deeper than any human connection could be. This is not a rejection of human relationship. Merton maintained deep friendships throughout his life, but it is recognition that the deepest part of you cannot be met by another human being. It can only be met by that which awakened you in the first place. When you rest in this meeting, the loneliness dissolves, not because you have found someone who understands you, but because you have found that which needs no understanding, that which simply is, that which holds you more intimately than any words could convey. And from this place of being met at the deepest level, you become capable of a new kind of relationship, a relationship that does not need others to see what you see, a relationship that does not depend on shared understanding, a relationship grounded in love rather than in mutual recognition. This is the freedom that sacred silence offers, not just protection of your inner life, but liberation from needing others to validate it. When you stop seeking recognition for your awakening, you discover that the awakening itself is enough, that the knowing knows itself, that the light does not need to be seen to be real. And in this freedom, something remarkable happens. You become more available to others, not less. Because you are no longer looking for something from them, you can truly see them. Because you are no longer performing your spirituality, you can truly connect. Because you are no longer leaking energy through unnecessary speech, you have more to give through presence and listening. This is the gift that Merton left us. Not a system of spiritual development, not a method for achieving enlightenment, but a way of being that honors both the infinite depth of inner experience and the practical demands of human relationship. Walk softly, he seemed to say. Hold gently what you have been given. Speak only when speech serves, and trust that the silence contains more than all words ever spoken. I have taken many words to say this, perhaps too many. But language is what we have in this medium, and sometimes we must use words to point beyond words. We must speak of silence to create the conditions for silence. What matters now is not what I have said, but what you do with it. Whether these words become another layer of mental accumulation, or whether they dissolve into direct knowing. Whether you add them to your collection of spiritual concepts, or whether you let them strip away one more layer of the unnecessary. The choice is yours. It has always been yours. No words, however wise, can make that choice for you. No teaching, however profound, can walk the path on your behalf. But know this: the silence is waiting. It has always been waiting. It waited before you were born, and it will wait after you are gone. It asks nothing of you except that you come home. And when you do, when you finally rest in that place where all words dissolve and all seeking ends, you will discover what Merton discovered, that you were never really alone, that the loneliness was just the last door, that on the other side of silence there is a love so vast it contains everything. This love does not need to be spoken. It does not need to be revealed. It simply is, shining through every moment, every breath. And to see it, to feel it, to know it without needing to prove it to anyone, that is the ultimate gift of sacred silence. And may the silence that holds all things hold you now and always.